This is Artful Discourse, your weekly escape into the vibrant world of creativity, culture, and intellectual exploration. I'm your host, Benjamin Kirk, and I invite you to join me on a journey through the rich tapestry of human thought and the beating heart of artistic expression at Fresno State's College of Arts and Humanities. In April, we were joined by Fresno State MCJ professor Hanayo Oya, who talked about her involvement of the Netflix series Turning Point, The Bomb in the Cold War. That special is still available on Netflix, and if you haven't seen it, it's an excellent view of modern history. At that time, Hanayo was preparing to take a group of students to Santiago, Chile for the UNESCO World Press Freedom Day Conference, where she and her students presented. Hanayo Oya joins us today to talk about that experience. Welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me again.
And by the way, congratulations on your Promising New Faculty Award. It's so huge. This is like your second year.
Yeah, absolutely. This is such an honor. I cannot thank enough to my chair, dean, and the provost, everyone who supported me.
All right. And you brought two of your students who went with you to Santiago, Chile today. So we get to talk about their experience. Jaselina Garcia and Jacquline Alvarez, welcome to you as well.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
What are your majors and when do you graduate?
Yeah, Jaselina Garcia, my major is MCJ, emphasis in film studies and arts and media, and this is my last year as a senior, and I'm glad to be an MCJ student.
Wow, you're about to graduate then.
Yes, I
All
am.
right. What are your plans?
My plans are to go to grad school to do the TV and film program in UCLA. If not, then Oregon, just because I like nature and
Mhm.
I do plan on coming back to California soon, but I kind of want to go different ways of the state. If not Oregon, then Georgia. I've applied to Georgia State and Oregon already. UCLA, I've had an interview with the chairman of Film and Studies master's program. So we're gonna see where life takes me.
And Jacqueline.
My major is broadcast journalism. I am minoring in Spanish and I graduate this spring. So I'm excited for that.
All right. And any plans?
My plans are to basically start my career in broadcast news.
Mhm.
So I've been working a lot towards that and a lot towards television news. So I plan on hopefully staying local and then branching out bigger. That is my main goal, is to
Mhm.
start off with our local market because it is large. We're in the Central Valley, and then to branch out into a bigger market.
Now, Santiago, Chile is about 5,800 miles from Fresno, California. I looked this up because it's not a direction we think about, right? Normally we think about going east-west, but
Yeah.
this is going pretty much south. And it's basically further than traveling to London. And so it's quite the trip. It's basically the other side of the world in the north-south sense. So we'll talk about the conference a little bit more in a minute. But Jaselina and Jacqueline, what was the trip itself like? Was this the furthest you'd ever traveled before?
Definitely a experience that I've never been on a plane or out of the country. So I mean, it was just great to get out there.
What was your impression of Santiago?
So for me, I have studied a lot about other cultures, Latin cultures, and things like that. So for me, it was nice to see um, another country other than just Mexico, what I'm used to. So I got the perspective of a everything that I've read in the books actually coming to life, and I really liked that. And my impression was that it's a very busy city, but everybody is everybody seems happy and like they're living a really good life.
Yeah. Well, I believe Haneo, she had us do country reports for different countries. And one of our classmates is Mexico. And after the country report, she was like, "Do you guys want to go to Chile?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course, let's go." So when my classmate did her country report, she was doing more Southern America. So it was cool just to see what she was also implementing when we go over there. Over to Chile. But it was just a wonderful experience. And when we did go to Chile, it was so laid back. Everybody was so chill. kind of remind me of like a little tower district, kind of,
Mm.
because everything was so artsy. And people were just so generous, even though they knew that I didn't speak Spanish well, but they were just willing to help, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out exactly what Jay said is that that's what I meant, but it feels like they're living a really nice quality life because they have tons of art and a lot of people are very welcoming to anybody. So it was awesome.
And they have good tomatoes. They have the best tomatoes I've ever had out there.
And do you speak Spanish?
Yes, I do speak
So
Spanish.
how was navigating down there? Was that a little bit easier for you, or?
Yeah, navigating over there was quite easy. And especially a lot of the people were very friendly and they actually complimented me on my Spanish. They thought I was Chilean as well, which was very interesting. So they thought I was one of them, which is kind of funny because I thought maybe it would be distinguishable between Mexican Spanish and Chilean Spanish. But we understood each other fine, and, they were super helpful, and even though Jay didn't know Spanish, she was talking to so many people, and she had a great time over there. But yeah, Spanish was easy, but they also did know English as well.
Yeah. No, did you have something to add? It looked like you.
Yeah, I just just wanted to mention that we tried a lot of local food there, and it was surprised like how delicious they are. I have to mention that there lots of seafood.
Oh yeah.
What was your
Yeah.
favorite food, you guys?
Mine was those, oysters because I don't usually like oysters because oysters here in the US, it's just like a pinch of salt or and lime on them, but over there, they actually cooked them and they put cheese on them. So it was really good. It had lots of flavor, like, it had a garlic flavor to it. That was my favorite dish.
I would say my favorite dish would be the Chilean empanadas that they had there. We had it as an appetizer, and it had eggplant in it. It had, I believe, if I'm not sure, it had some rabbit in there. But they're a fan of rabbit. Very tender meat. I'm a fan as well. After that,
I tried as well.
yeah,
Very good.
at dinner, you had a big rabbit steak bone.
Hmm.
But yeah, that the Chilean empanadas were my favorite, and they were just like a chicken nugget. You just want to eat more and keep eating.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like before going to Chile, we invited a history professor, Bill Scuban, as a guest speaker in my class, and he made a list of the things we should try, and then he recommended every food and a place to go. So the one of the things I marked on my top list was a conglio. If you remember, it's a local
Yes.
fish. It's a fried fish, and it's really tasty. Uh-huh.
Al-
Yeah.
All right. So you get to the conference. You're surrounded by journalists from around the world. Describe that atmosphere and what was that like for you?
So for me, it felt like a dream come true because I've been looking towards doing Spanish journalism. And so to be surrounded by everybody who's pretty much speaking Spanish, because we're over there in Chile, it was very awesome and nice to know their perspectives. I learned a lot from the journalists over there. There was journalists from Argentina, from Chile, from Austria, so many different places, but yet their main goal was to speak about the issues or topics of Latin America. So that was really nice to experience that and then to ask them questions. And they were really helpful and they gave tons of great advice.
Yeah. I believe that everybody there they had their own intelligence to give, even if they were from Northern America, Southern America, Europe, Asia, and just to have that opportunity makes us realize that as journalists, we become together as unity, and that makes our voice more powerful. And that's why we kind of went to the freedom of press as well, just to find other solutions to know that we have these rights as journalists. And they're just like regular people like us.
Mhm.
They've just been through more experience, and that's more hands on. And I like talking to people. I'm really open about that. So just to have a response back, that's so helpful. It's like I wrote a bunch of stuff down in my notes because I'm like, I need to know this for my career. And I work at the Collegian, so being a reporter as that as well, it also went hand in hand. Just because of like copyrights or just learning about how to introduce yourself to an interviewer. I mean, it was all just it was all a shebang of things that I needed to know as a future reporter. So it was just I was just happy to be there, honestly.
Yeah, and what was awesome about that is that even though these professionals have been in the industry for a long time, they treated you like colleagues. So they didn't see us as students who don't know anything. I think they respected that we went all the way over there to Chile to become better journalists and to get more experience. So I really love that about all the journalists.
All right, so you presented at the conference. The students presented at the conference, and Hanayo did back to back. And we'll have a link because they videoed it, and I think it streamed live at the time. And so we'll have a link in the show notes, our podcast show notes, anyway, so that people can watch it. But give me just what was the presentation about?
So this presentation actually started with a single proposal to UNESCO conference, and I submitted this proposal earlier this year. And when I submitted this proposal as a panel discussion, I had no idea I can take my students to Chile, but I had some mind that if this proposal would be accepted, I wanted to take my students to the conference. That is because I know that the impact of having UNESCO in their resume,
Mm-hmm.
so that would definitely help their future career, like jobs and in graduate
Oh,
schools.
absolutely.
So I was thinking about that, and then this panel discussion itself is about the pressure toward the independent media in Asia and Africa. So I collaborate with my previous institution that I work for as an assistant professor, Syracuse University, and my former colleagues at Syracuse, my former student at Syracuse came together, and they presented the situation in Africa, and I talked about the situation in Asia with case studies through Japan. So the purpose of this panel discussion is seeing that even though we are in two different continents, we are all facing the threat to independent media, which is a global trend. So, what my students are contributing to this discussion is that they brought more voices to the board, to the table. So they interviewed like over 10 journalists across the world, and asking what kind of press freedom issues in their countries, and what is the future they wanted to wish to see. So we combine these interviews into 10 minutes and then bring it to the table as a discussion.
The journalists you picked, I noticed some of them were actually local that were filmed here, but there was other journalists from around the world. Did you film them at the conference?
Yes, so I actually filmed some journalists at the conference because they had tons of perspective. So I wanted to get more of that international perspective on journalism and also focus on what struggles or what advice they might have because I thought that would be important. We're there for that, and I thought it'd be nice to present some of their insight into our project.
Yeah. And so you basically cut that together because you presented something that was edited and ready to go. So you must have worked pretty quick on that.
Yeah, we worked on it pretty quickly. Jay helped me out a lot with that. We had to edit in our hotel literally on the way to the conference, but it went perfect. It went fine because all their answers were solid. So,
Yeah.
and the skills that Jay has and our intentions for the project were pretty clear on that.
Yeah, and I got to interview someone through Zoom. She works with ICIJ for the Panora papers, and I think that that was actually one of my goal was to reach out and get somebody that actually has worked on a worldwide case. Um, and that Zoom went really well. I edited that. I also helped Jackie and a couple of my other classmates with their interviews as well. But as the editing aspect, that's my forte. So I just enjoyed it, and just talking about press freedom rights meant a lot as well because it was on everybody's mind, and it was press freedom world day, I believe, when we went. So everybody was just also talking about the sustainabilities about oppression and just everything that happens within journalists of them doing their job in their career.
Sorry about that. All right. So tell me a little bit about what you learned through this process. What was your impression of the state of the freedom of press around the world after talking to the journalists? And did talking to them have any impact on or did it shape your perspective? Did it change your perspective at all?
Yeah, it definitely changed my perspective on journalism because um, I feel like in a way I got to see it a little bit differently because I do know Spanish, so I could tell when certain, or I could relate to certain issues, or I could tell that certain issues were happening over there were also similar to other experiences of Mexico and things like that. So, um, like for example, when the president, he presented at the conference, and in the Spanish room, when he came up, everybody kind of sighed. But then when I asked what happened in the English room, where Jay and some of our other classmates were, they say that everybody clapped. So it's kind of interesting to see, um, the different issues that may be going on and how they're interpreted differently by others. So yeah, it really shaped me in knowing that, that there's always more to learn, and pretty much that the the way that journalism is, and how you learn is by learning it as you're there. So
Mhm.
I thought that was really cool.
I think that I did learn and it did benefit me because it taught me that not only is, social media and everything controlled by the press, but it's also controlled by the government. And I also think that that was interesting because everywhere else in the world is different. Their media coverage is different. Some media coverages don't are oppressed. Like my country report was in Laos because I'm Laotian and my grandparents are from there. And all their media is covered by the government. There's no really press freedom over there, and it's very bare minimum. So when I've read about that before going to Chile, it really came to mind that the same issues that we have here is the same issues that is all around the world internationally, and that's what caught my eye the most because it's like you're seeing journalism in a way, and now you're in a group where people have their opinions, and now you're blossoming basically with all these people that are trying to tell you that you have these rights and that journalists, they're activists and they do speak about stuff that could be somewhat kind of turned against. But at the end of the day, when we have conferences that bring all these people together, that's what makes the government know that the media is here for the career and the facts that are written. But I think that the most impact thing was just seeing everybody just so encouraged to do one thing. And it pushes us to be resilient as students because we see that we can go to this conference. And just because we're from Fresno doesn't mean that we can't see all the problems. And I actually started reading other newsletters from different countries after Chile. And one newsletter that I did subscribe to, I talked to this European teacher. She was teaching at London, and she told me to subscribe to the newsletter at the London University. I believe it's a Christian university in London. I'm not too sure, but she was really a nice lady and told me that you have to read other newsletters or other news media from different countries to know that the sustainability of everything is one cooking pot, and that everybody that does support press freedom, they're in that cooking pot. So it's just like a reality check for me that I really appreciate it, and I can carry that on with me.
So one thing that struck me before students presented, they all introduced themselves, and there was I don't recall his name, but one of the students from Fresno State, and so he talked about. He said, we're very fortunate to be in the United States where we have the freedom of press, and not all countries have that. As you pointed out too, with Laos. However, when you presented, Onoya, you talked about the Reporters Without Borders Freedom of the Press Index that had just come out a couple days before your presentation. And in that, United States was ranked 55th in the world for freedom of press, and it had actually dropped recently over the last year. It had been like 45th, I think, or 44th. Um, it was about 10 index points down from last year. And then you asked the students what they thought it was before that, before you actually told them what it was. But how was that for you? Was that an eye-opening experience? Was that something you expected? Was that something that um, I think the perception is here in the United States that we're at the top or close to the top, at least top 10, but to be 50 in the world out of 180 countries.
I think that that was a very interesting fun fact that our professor presented because I think it really reflects what's going on with journalism and with news in the United States. Because in my classes, we always talk about how do we save journalism and all those things. So I think that that really reflected what's going on in the real world, and it was very interesting to see that, and kind of wondering how future journalists or yeah, how future journalists could hopefully get that number back up.
Yeah.
I think personally when she showed me the demographics of how United States are the 55th, safest to do journalism, that definitely surprised me because, you know, I mean, growing up, it's just the place to be, right? The United States is just the place to be. But in all actuality, that's what being a journalist is, to find a question and get investigative into it and then actually do your research on that. So, I mean, Hanayo is always the teacher to bring stuff to my attention, and I thank her so much for that because it's good to be, you know, on both sides, not just blindsided to one thing and oh, America's the best and this and that. I mean, it's to a certain extent, and I think it's basically news based just because we do have the world's biggest media, but at the same time, they do hide some stuff, and that's fine because we have journalists that actually dig it up and investigate into that and then seek the truth. So I think that's one of why we're 55th and lower now as you speak. But it did surprise me and it shocked me because, I mean, after that, we went to Chile and they were higher than the United States in that ranking. So, I mean, it shows you, where you're living and what's around you. And that's what I've thought. It was definitely eye opening at that point, yes.
And Hannah, you really have a global perspective. You've worked on global stories, especially with your Netflix series and everything else. And I kind of want to get your perspective on that because that kind of blew me away too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I came to United States 6 years ago as a Fulbrighter at the UC Berkeley, and one of the things struck me the most was the fact that younger generation in this country don't know much about what's going on outside the United States as much as they should do. And that's actually brought my attention to becoming a professor in this country because I thought I can contribute my international background for educating future generations to help them become professional storytellers. And when I noticed that was, like in the United States, people say like, "Oh, the U.S. is the number one country. We are the best," without knowing the facts. So like seeing where our status is, like using these charts, the rankings, which was assessed from the Paris-based organizations, the independent organization assessed that, and then the U.S. is a 55, 55th. So seeing that objective assessment is really important for younger generation to understand where we are, not blindly believing that we are the best. And that is so important to understand what we need to do to improve. And when we talk about press freedom, we always link that with like killing, how many journalists have been killed, how many journalists have been missing, or like conflict, reporting, war reporting, things like that. But it's not necessarily like that. It's press freedom can include be free from oppression, which is corporate power and self censorship and regulation, any kinds of regulation. But if you look at the media in the United States, the corporate power is pretty dominant, and also self censorship. Many reporters worry about getting fired if they write something might hurt corporate interest. that is actually main reason why the U.S. is such a still in the 55th in the world. So it's so important to understand that what we believe the best in the world is not actually the best. There are so many things we need to work on.
Yeah. And I have a little bit of a journalist background. I worked in a local TV station for about 10 years, and I remember clearly some of those instances of that kind of invisible wall between the news editorial and the business side of things. And there's that occasionally there's tension there, and occasionally the wrong side wins. And that's kind of a I could see that happening on a much bigger scale too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then I think it's really important for students to understand what kind of world they are going to head into when they become professional. You know, I always tell my students like, well, you will face a lot of like challenges by cooperate, whether it's a sales department. Some people might ask you to do self-regulate. You need to continue fighting against that.
Yeah.
So, like by meeting these international journalists who continuously fight, to secure the press freedom in their country, I wanted them to learn the power. I wanted to learn how to earn the power from their reporting.
Yeah. Now, you and Benjamin Tete, is that how you
Yeah,
pronounce his last name? With
absolutely.
Syracuse University presented together. You were the kind of the core of the presentation. Along with him, you focused on Asia. He focused on Africa, and you talked a lot about the press freedom in Japan, emphasizing a lot of like self censorship and online harassment and legal constraints. Can you go into that a little bit, just a little bit of what your findings were?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in this presentation, I talked about a case study about a journalist in Okinawa in Japan. So, little bit background of Okinawa is that Okinawa used to be an independent nation until it was occupied and colonized by Japan 400 years ago, and it became a part of Japan around like 200 years ago officially. And ever since then, it's still part of Japan. But people there still believe they are indigenous. They call themselves Ryukyu people, and they want historically they've been calling for independence, but still it hasn't been come true. So the media in Okinawa is very, very critical to the central Japanese government. But another the sad fact is that the Okinawa has become the battlefield during the 1945 at the end of the World War II, and the 1/4 of population were killed in the battle. And since then, the U.S. military occupied the islands, and even today, 15% of the total land is still occupied by the U.S. military bases. So the reporters there, of course, like they criticize the government policy and the U.S. military bases policy because there's nothing they can do. It's out of their control. This U.S. military have absolute right to control their bases. So the local government cannot control the environmental issues, the noise pollution, the crime and accidents, things like that. So the local reporters always criticize and write a critical story about that, and I was one of them actually. I was a local reporter in Okinawa. So, but at the same time, we always face a criticism or like online harassment from the nationalist, we'll
Mhm.
say quote unquote nationalist. Um, so it has been growing situation in Japan that these journalists who um, who write for the people's right has been faced this criticism and faced this harassment, and many people have to leave the occupation because of this harassment. So like I wanted to highlight the case studies to showcase that in Japan, there's the press independence issues that are going on, and part of the reason is this online harassment toward the people toward the journalists who write for people. So it's a pretty different situation in the U.S. So I thought it was interesting to shed light on this.
All right, and we are about out of time. So I just want to ask anybody, any final thoughts about your trip to Santiago, Chile?
Yes, I'd like to say that I am definitely going to enroll in the class again because it was a really fun class and we got to work with tons of professionals. It was amazing. And I'd also like to compliment and thank my professor for being such a great teacher, because ever since she came, I feel like journalism, the routine stopped, and journalism really came to life, and that I became much better at reporting. So thank you, Professor, for all your insight and helping us become better journalists and thinking outside the box.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, they helped me become a better professor. So I have to thank you guys. I learned a lot from this experience too. And I also wanted to emphasize how much we thank President Circle Funding to help us make this amazing teaching program possible. So without their help, without their financial help, we wouldn't have been able to make this happen. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And I also want to thank Hanayo and the President's Circle Funding, because this is a great opportunity that I want my cousins, my younger cousins, to go to. And, Fresno is counted out as a minority. So just to go and knowing that there's something that can benefit us, especially in this career field, it's just amazing. And I want everybody to experience this that wants to go into this career, because the UNESCO really opened my eyes about national journalism, and now I'm not just only thinking about doing journalism for the United States. So I mean, this is such a great opportunity to just take us students, and I can't really, I just want other people to go. I want future of journalism. I want this to impact our future students that are coming here next year, or so on and so forth. So thank you to Hanayo and the Circle Funding, and thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, and thank you, Hanayo, Jaselina, and Jacqueline, for joining us today. Artful Discourse is a production of the College of Arts and Humanities at California State University, Fresno. The dean is Dr. Honora Chapman. This program is written, directed, and produced by me, Benjamin Kirk, the college's communication specialist. The theme song for Artful Discourse is Maiden Voyage by Fresno State music professor Benjamin Boone from his album, Joy. More information about his music can be found at benjaminboone.com. Special thanks to KFSR and FSR Underground General Manager Julie Lindahl for making this show possible. You can learn more about the College of Arts and Humanities and find an archive of our shows at our website, cah.fresnostate.edu, or on our blog, fresnostatecah.com.